The chains were already cutting into her wrists when the gates of the captured city finally collapsed, the sound of Roman iron hammering against stone echoing across the valley, and for a brief moment, before the smoke swallowed the streets and the legionaries surged forward, it was still possible to believe that surrender might spare a queen's life, that royal blood still carried weight in a world that had not yet been fully ground beneath Roman boots. It was a belief Rome spent centuries proving false. Long before the empire crowned emperors or built marble forums, the Roman state had developed a cold, systematic relationship with defeated royalty, especially women who ruled. Captured queens were not treated as bargaining chips, nor as noble prisoners of war, nor even as defeated enemies deserving swift execution. They were transformed into instruments of Roman power, living symbols of conquest whose suffering was carefully structured, legally justified, and publicly consumed. Their deaths were rarely quick. Their survival was often worse. Rome did not merely conquer territories. It conquered meaning. And when a queen fell into Roman hands, her identity, ruler, mother, symbol of resistance, was dismantled piece by piece until what remained served Rome's political theater. To understand how this worked, one must first understand that Rome did not fear queens. It feared what they represented. In a Mediterranean world dominated by male kingship and patriarchal authority, a woman who commanded armies, inspired rebellion, or embodied a rival political order was a profound ideological threat. A defeated king could be displayed as proof of Roman military superiority. A defeated queen had to be broken as proof of Roman inevitability. The Roman response was not improvisation. It was doctrine. From the Republic onward, Rome's laws made no distinction between male and female enemies in terms of punishment, but its customs did. A king could be executed quietly after a triumph, his usefulness exhausted. A queen, however, was far more valuable alive. Alive, she could be humiliated. Alive, she could be paraded. Alive, she could be made to watch her children destroyed, her lineage erased, her people reduced to silent spectators beneath Roman banners. The process usually began with capture, and capture itself was an act of deliberate degradation. Queens were not seized in the heat of battle, unless unavoidable. Roman commanders preferred to take them after defeat, when resistance had collapsed and negotiations seemed possible. The promise of mercy, never written, never guaranteed, was the bait. Once in Roman custody, the queen ceased to be sovereign. She became war property. Chains were not symbolic. They were practical. Iron fetters marked the body with the physical reality of subjugation, and Roman sources repeatedly note their use even on high-born captives. Clothing was often stripped or replaced with simple garments. Jewelry was confiscated. Crowns were removed not ceremonially, but casually, like a tool no longer needed. From there, the queen was moved slowly. Rome understood geography as psychology. Captives were marched through allied territories and hostile provinces alike, ensuring that news of their capture traveled faster than the columns themselves. Each village saw the same image: the fallen ruler, alive, restrained, silent, surrounded by disciplined Roman infantry who did not jeer or gloat. The message was not cruelty. It was inevitability. Arrival in Rome did not bring resolution. It brought the beginning of spectacle. The Roman triumph was not a celebration in the modern sense. It was a ritualized reenactment of domination sanctioned by the Senate, steeped in religious authority and designed to overwrite memory. The victorious general rode in a chariot, dressed as Jupiter, while behind him marched the spoils of war: weapons, banners, statues, treasure, and finally, the captives themselves. For queens, this was a point of no return. They were displayed last, after the audience had already been conditioned by the parade's scale and symbolism. Chains were visible. Children, if they survived, were marched alongside their mother. The Roman crowd was not there to pity. It was there to witness the erasure of a rival world order. Ancient accounts describe silence more often than mockery. Silence was power. A queen reduced to a spectacle did not need to be insulted. Her presence alone was proof enough. After the triumph, the public assumed the story ended. It never did. Captured queens were rarely executed immediately. Roman law required that execution after a triumph be sanctioned, and even then method mattered. A quick death was reserved for enemies whose story no longer served Rome. Queens still had a role to play. Many were imprisoned indefinitely. The Tullianum, later known as a Mamertine prison, was a stone chamber beneath Rome, damp, dark, and intentionally forgotten. It was not designed for rehabilitation or even long-term survival. It was designed for removal. Prisoners vanished there, sometimes strangled quietly, sometimes left to die unseen. Others were kept alive longer, housed under guard, stripped of status but preserved as living warnings. They could be summoned for display, referenced in speeches, used as leverage in negotiations with their former subjects. For some queens, the punishment was extended through their children. Rome understood dynastic continuity as a threat. Sons were executed or enslaved. Daughters were absorbed into Roman households. Their identities dissolved into marriage alliances or servitude. A queen forced to watch her lineage erased was experiencing something Rome considered more final than death. Consider Cleopatra VII, often remembered for her defiance, but rarely examined through the lens of Roman protocol. Octavian did not want her dead immediately. He wanted her alive for his triumph. Her suicide was not a romantic gesture. It was a strategic denial. By choosing death on her own terms, Cleopatra robbed Rome of its most potent symbol. Octavian still celebrated, but something essential was missing. Rome noticed. Contrast that with Boudica, queen of the Icen Eye. Roman sources are unclear about her final fate, but the logic of Roman punishment suggests that her death, whether by poison or illness, was preferable to capture precisely because capture would have meant public annihilation of everything she represented. Her rebellion was crushed not just militarily, but narratively. Rome controlled the ending. There were others, less remembered, whose names survive only in fragments. Zenobia Palmyra, paraded through Rome in golden chains so heavy they required attendants to support her weight, was spared execution but not humiliation. She lived, but as a Roman curiosity, her former empire reduced to an anecdote. What made Rome's treatment of captured queens worse than death was not physical pain alone. It was temporal. Death ends suffering. Rome extended it, structured it, and justified it as order. These women were forced to outlive their own identities. Queens without kingdoms, mothers without heirs, symbols without meaning except what Rome assigned to them. The cruelty was not emotional outburst. It was administrative. Rome believed in precedent. Each captured queen reinforced a lesson for the next. Resistance would not be rewarded with martyrdom. It would be punished with erasure. And yet, in the long arc of history, Rome failed to control memory entirely. The very queens it sought to reduce to objects became symbols of resistance centuries later. Their stories survived not because Rome preserved them, but because Rome could not completely silence them. The records meant to demonstrate Roman supremacy now reveal Roman fear. Fear of women who ruled, who fought, who inspired, and who refused to disappear quietly. Rome won its wars. It built its empire. But in the process, it exposed something fundamental about power, that the need to humiliate is often rooted in insecurity, and that the most dangerous enemy is not the one you kill, but the one whose story refuses to die. The captured queens of Rome did not fall in battle. They were dismantled in public, reduced by law, and broken by design. Their punishment was not death. It was survival without agency, memory without honor, and existence stripped of meaning. And yet, 2,000 years later, their names endure. If this story moved you, if it challenged what you thought you knew about power, conquest, and history's forgotten victims, then stay with this channel, because the past still has truths left to uncover.